Hey guys, how you doing? Hope you're well. It's Alessio speaking today from Castle Combe, a little English village from near the Cotswolds in England. Now, I just want to tell you in this video about an interesting but also a very dangerous trend that is developing in the mainstream media, which is completely wrong. And I want to tell you what it is. Before I start this video, though, I just want to give a quick disclaimer. I am not political. I don't care about any political parties. In fact, I don't support any party, whether it's a Democrat, Republican. I don't really care about any of that political stuff. But here's the thing, guys. You might have noticed this too, and it's a fact that right now, one of the most dangerous trends that is developing right now is that the mainstream media is politicizing the markets. In other words, what you might have noticed is that anytime the markets fall, anytime the stock markets drop, or anytime you hear about a threat of a recession, you keep hearing people in the mainstream media saying, oh, it's definitely President Trump's fault, that President Trump is deliberately or through his actions is causing the economy to crash. This is absolute nonsense. In fact, if you speak to any professional analyst, professional trader, or anybody who spent their time trading the markets, they'll tell you the same thing. It's absolute nonsense. One person, whether it's the president or a politician or anybody, cannot destroy the economy. It's not just one cause or one factor that comes into effect. For example, let me just give you some context. If you go back about 20 years ago to the dot-com crash, the famous crash that occurred in the year 2000, the famous tech crash, as they call it, the dot-com crash. Now, I don't remember anyone blaming the dot-com crash on President Clinton, because it wasn't. It's ridiculous. The fact is that greed and a massive bubble in the tech markets, in the technology markets, they essentially caused that massive bubble to crash. And listen, bubbles eventually burst. That's what happens with any market, any economy. Eventually those bubbles will burst. Let's go back about almost about 12, 13 years ago to the 2007, 2008 crash. Now, would it be correct to say that President Bush caused that market to crash? No, it's ridiculous. We all know who was to blame for that massive crash in 2008. The big banks like Goldman Sachs, essentially rigging the system, essentially creating instruments that was eventually going to lead to the market crash. And of course, the greed of millions of people borrowing and over leveraging themselves to the point that they couldn't essentially afford those mortgages they were taking out, which caused the housing market to crash. So guys, we know that the 2008 market crash was not to blame on one person, President Bush. So why are we blaming President Trump on the recent market events or the potential threat of a recession that might happen? The fact is, guys, look, put aside all the China talk. Yes, is it possible that some of the tweets that President Trump is sending out might cause some volatility in the markets? Yes, true. But guys, one person, the president, cannot cause the economy to crash. Again, no smart, intelligent person, no market analyst can possibly agree with that. Now, let me just give you some more explanation on that point. The fact is that the markets, the stock markets, have been in a bubble now for several years. This market, the stock market, has been in a bubble even before President Trump took office. So the fact that we're blaming President Trump for the market to crash or the economy to collapse or a recession is ridiculous. Look, first of all, recessions and market crashes are cyclical. Simply put, they happen every 10 years, almost every 10 years. This cycle repeats itself. We have a recession, we have a market crash. Okay? Now, what the mainstream media is doing is, oh, the actions of President Trump is going to cause the market to collapse and we're going to have a recession. No, that is ridiculous. Recessions will happen anyway. Market crashes will happen anyway. It has very little or nothing to do with the president. It has everything to do with the actions of human behavior. Human behavior is what causes bubbles, and it is also what causes markets to eventually crash. Eventually, bubbles, which is exactly what the markets have been in, the stock market has been a bubble now for several years. Again, just listen to Robert Shiller, John Hussman. They'll tell you the same thing. This market has been a bubble even before President Trump took office. And it's also a fact the Federal Reserve has been pumping this economy with fiat currency, essentially printing money, which has helped build this bubble in the first place. So the fact is, yes, we're probably going to head for a recession and we're probably heading for a market crash potentially in the next 12 months. The fact is, it is too dangerous to buy into this narrative, the false narrative that the mainstream media is pushing out, that it's the cause of President Trump, that President Trump is apparently causing the markets to crash or cause a recession, which is absolutely ridiculous. And the fact is, there could be other factors which we're not aware of that could actually collapse and crash the economy, factors which probably have nothing to do with a trade war with China. For example, one of the things that could crash the economy and cause a recession is the fact that there are uncertainties in Europe. Nobody knows what's going on in Europe. There's the fact of Brexit, there's the fact that German economy seems to be slowing down. There's also the fact that the Chinese economy is on the brink of collapse. It's well known that China has been in a bubble now for several years, so it's quite likely that the Chinese markets may actually collapse way before the global markets or indeed the American markets collapse. So I think we should be careful and not rush into some kind of judgment and say, oh, the recession is happening because of so-and-so, of a trade war with China, which actually I think has very little to do with a potential collapse in the economy or indeed a recession. And again, as I mentioned before, this video is not supposed to be some kind of political defense of the president. I'm not political. I don't even care about politics. But the fact is, I'm just letting you know the media seems to be giving us the wrong information about how the markets actually work. So guys, let's not be fooled by this false narrative, and let's keep ourselves objective. And one of the dangers of believing this false narrative that the president is causing this markets to eventually collapse is that what happens is it politicizes the markets. It politicizes pretty much everything in the economy, and it's a dangerous trend, and it's completely false. What we should be doing instead of listening to the false narratives of the mainstream media, is really just paying attention to the charts, paying attention to the price action, and seeing where the price is going to take us eventually. And this should be very interesting. Thanks a lot, guys. I'll see you guys in the next video update.